Hey guys, welcome back to Tenta Outdoors. My name's Al Tenta, one of the 3 remaining contestants on this season 10 of Alone. Today's video, we're going to do a recap of episode 9. Stick around. So the episode started out with me in my shelter, cracking open the door of my teepee into a winter wonderland. It was just a beautiful snow-covered scene. I headed down to the water, looked out to my fishing spot, looked out to the lake, and as I was doing that, I looked in the camera and I realized that I really hated my mustache. It was this combination of gray, red, blonde, and black ugly hair really getting long on my lip. It was actually starting to grow into my mouth, which was pretty gross, and I was just wishing I could shave it off. So the next scene showed me sitting in my shelter, talking about how many arrows I had left. And at that point, I think I had lost all 3 of my Flu blunts that I was using for small game. I wasn't too worried about my small game blunts in preparation for the show. I wanted to make sure I always had 6 broadheads. And if I lost my 3 blunts, I could always just unscrew my broadheads, and I knew I could make a small blunt for small game. And that's what I did. And as I was sitting there on my bed making my blunts, there was a voiceover about me speaking about my dad and how he suffered as a child, and how there's so much suffering in the world that even though it sounded strange, I wanted to experience suffering. I wanted to push myself in this game just to see what it was like. So I noticed the lake was very calm, and there weren't a lot of calm lake days out there. So whenever the lake was calm, I really wanted to take advantage of that and fish, because when it was windy, doing hand lining, it was nearly impossible to cast your line. So I headed down to my fishing rock and started fishing. Now right away, I got a couple bites, I got another strike, and I just could not get a hookup. Got a little frustrated, but not too bad. I was hopeful because I was still getting bites, and I knew the lake trout hadn't moved out into the deeper water yet, so I felt hopeful that I would still be able to procure food for a little bit while longer before the fish moved out into the deep water. So when I was walking down to my fishing rock, you notice it was covered in snow. And whenever there was snow covering rocks on the shoreline or whatever, I always made sure I walked super carefully, because I remember past episodes of Alone, people falling or slipping on these rocks and taking themselves out of the game. And I was just really aware of that, and I did not want to slip and fall needlessly and take myself out of the game. So as I was fishing, I was always kind of thinking, how long can I live on half a lake trout a day? I'm not sure if I was actually speaking or if that was a voiceover, but anyways, I was always wondering if half a lake trout a day, which they said was about 600 calories, would be enough to sustain me for the long term. So that's just something I was always nervous about, because I always knew I was losing weight. Every time I looked in the camera, I could kind of see these lines in my face. I could visibly see my face getting thinner. And I remember sitting at the edge of my bed at night when I had a fire in my teepee, looking down at my legs, my quads, and I could visibly see my quads were really shrinking. And I could feel that in the strength of them too, like walking around. So even though I was eating half a fish a day, it was always in the back of my mind, is this enough to sustain me till the end of the game? And I'd kind of planned out half a fish a day to get me, I think in that episode I said, this was on day 42 or 43, that I had fish, half a fish a day, stored and smoked and ready to go up to day 55. And that was on day 41 or 42, maybe 43, I can't remember. And then I had a plan, okay, if I make it to 55, then if I don't get any more food, I'll fast and try to push it to 60. But then later in that episode, I did catch, I caught that big white fish. So that was actually a larger fish, so that was probably 4 days worth of food. So by the end of that episode, I knew that I had food until day 59. But I was always nervous about, am I eating enough? I didn't want to be pulled out of the game early, even when I had food, because we all know that's happened in the past as well, like rationing too much. So yeah, it was always on my mind for sure. My next scene showed me going for a walk in the bush with my bow, looking for squirrels, looking for grouse. And I think mostly it was probably just to get out, to keep my mind healthy and kind of keep my mind positive, because sitting in the shelter for long periods of time, it's never good, and that's when kind of the dark thoughts, Mikey alluded to this as well, this episode too, when you're sitting in your shelter, in your dark shelter, that's kind of when your mind can start going dark. So I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure that that walk was to keep my mind positive and just to keep myself busy, and also look for grouse and squirrels and fresh tracks. And as I was walking through the snow, I had one of my sad attacks. I'm like, oh, I thought of the snow, and I thought of playing in the snow with my kids, and I just kind of had a brief sad attack. You know, I let it happen. And like I said in previous recaps, they just they pass. They just, if you let it happen, don't fight them. They don't last too long. So when I got back to my day use area, they showed my fire pit, and they showed the teepee in the back. I just want to make it clear that that's not my teepee. That was actually my smoker. And that was just right above my fishing rock where I spent a lot of time fishing. So yeah, when I got back to there, I really felt more tired than usual. And yeah, my legs were sore, and I was starting to get a little bit dizzy when I bent over, knowing that my blood pressure was a little bit lower. So I considered possibly I may need to increase my food intake, but that would also change my plan and how long I'd be able to stay in the game. So yeah, my brain was always thinking about rationing and am I eating enough, or how many days am I going to make it in? Once I run out of food, how long will I be able to fast for? These things were just always on my mind. So the next scene in this episode was me waking up in my shelter and wishing myself a happy birthday. It was my 52nd birthday, and I will never forget that birthday. I mean, it was a pretty special day, and it ended up being a pretty good day. Now for my birthday, my little birthday celebration, I made like a 3-layer fish birthday cake with a candle on top, and they showed me kind of holding it up and lighting a little candle on the top and blowing it out, wishing myself a happy birthday. Now I did eat an extra chunk of fish that day. I think that was 1.5, no, I think that was 3/4 of an average sized lake trout. So I had one fillet, I folded it in half, then I cut another fillet, a smaller fillet in half, and I put that in the middle, and it was supposed to look like a birthday cake, but it just looked like 3 slabs of fish piled on top of each other. But anyways, that was my birthday cake. I boiled it up, and man, I'm telling you, that lake trout, even though it was smoked, I always still boiled it just in case some of it soured or went bad, or there was some bacteria in there that could potentially make me sick and take me out of the game. So I probably didn't need to boil it. I just boiled it as a precaution. If something was in there that was toxic to me, I was going to kill it in the boil. So yeah, had my birthday cake, and I felt quite full after that. It was a good day. At this point, there was a voiceover, or it could have been me talking directly to the camera. I can't remember. But I started talking about the mental game, and I started feeling that at this point in the game, you know, day 43 or 42, whatever it was, I could really feel that this was the time when the mental game was starting to play. And I knew that other contestants would be feeling that way too. I was quite sure it wouldn't just be me. And this was a time when you had to really turn on the positive thinking and let those sad attacks happen, and just keep pushing through, just keep grinding forward through the days, because I knew that days were going to get harder and harder from this point on. Now, up to this point in the game, I'd had my gill net set fairly early on. I don't know, I think I made it within the first 2 weeks. I can't remember exactly, but I had it set in what I felt were really good areas in deep water. I mean, I was catching fish right beside where I had my gill net set, and I was feeling a little frustrated, wondering why I wasn't getting anything in my gill net. I wasn't overly concerned because I was catching enough fish through hand lining, but I was starting to wonder what's going on. And so I went down to check it on my birthday. I remember it was too windy to fish, but I went down there to check it, and I saw something in my gill net. And I pulled it in, and sure enough, there was a fairly large whitefish, Cisco, and I think on there I said it was about 6 pounds. It may have been more. It may be 8 pounds. I'm not great at estimating the poundage of fish, but I'm sure it was between 6 to 8 pounds. And it was, they didn't really show it, but the girth of it was incredible. Like, it was incredibly thick. I remember when I cut it into fillets, couldn't believe how much meat there was on that thing. And usually a lake trout lasts me 2 days, but I knew this Cisco would last me for 4 days. So what a birthday present that was. He did wreak havoc on my net though, so it took me quite a while to untangle that net and get it set out, but it was well worth it. I was pretty happy about that. Okay, so at the end of the episode, they showed me celebrating my birthday by doing a little fireworks display at the beach. Now, I read some comments online. A lot of people thought that was a flare gun. It was not a flare gun. It was simply a bear banger. But yeah, so I waited till it was quite dark out, and I shot a bear banger off in the air in celebration of my birthday. So next up in this episode, we have Mel. So Mel's first seen in this episode is her lying down in her sleeping bag, explaining how she woke up to a cold draft on her back, and upon further inspection, realizing that a mouse had chewed a hole in her sleeping bag and the cold air was coming up through it. Now, mice like to steal stuff like the stuffing and the fur, and to line their homes to keep them warm throughout the winter. So what Mel does next is pretty cool. It's a good example of how to utilize a regular object and turn it into something useful. So she took the underwire from her bra and fashioned it into a needle, and took thread from her scarf and repaired the sleeping bag perfectly. So Mel's collecting firewood to get her through the upcoming winter, and she's concerned about finding enough dry tinder to get fires going easily. Then Mel makes a great comment. She says, "You can never have enough wood." Mel's next segment shows her being successful with one of her deadfall trap sets and harvests a little field mouse. They then show her skinning it and processing it to eat. Mel makes a powerful statement that really resonated with me. She talked about how she has 4 things that a lot of people do not have in the world. They are love, choice, freedom, and a home. Mel talks about how she doesn't want to waste time, and she wants to seize each moment each and every day. She then walks down to the beach and films a gorgeous sunset. And she talks about how she's learning to slow down and enjoy the details. The next scene, they show Melanie fishing. She's doing some hand lining. She made a cool little spool and was actually getting the line out a decent distance using that hand lining technique. Unfortunately, she was unsuccessful, and she headed back to her shelter. At this point in the episode, she decides she does not want to spend another day away from Brian, and she decides to tap out and remove herself from the competition. There are now 3 people remaining in the game. I really liked how the edit showed the time lapse of the deconstruction of the shelter and just showing the whole land reclamation scene. I think that's really cool to show. Next up in the episode, we have Mikey. Now they show Mikey sitting in a shelter discussing how upset he is about missing his son's upcoming birthday, and just generally how much he loves his son and how much he misses him. So Mikey then creates a really cool carving. He didn't show the audience right away, but he made Nikolai a cup and ball toy for his birthday. They show Mike coming back from a hunting excursion. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful. As he's making his way into a shelter and settling in, he does mention how difficult he finds the dark times in a shelter, because it's often difficult to keep your mind in a positive frame. The next scene shows Mikey finding a large spike. So Mikey fashions this spike into a very impressive knife and sheath that he puts around his neck, and he calls it his bush knife. And I believe he made reference to Biko off of season 8, who made a similar knife out of a spike that he found as well. Mikey also gives a lot of credit to his stepfather for teaching him many of the skills that he's utilizing during this experience. Mike discusses the importance of teaching kids outdoor skills when they're young and their minds are open to learning. Next up in the episode, we have Wyatt. Wyatt's opening scene is speaking about how much colder he's feeling it's getting, and he needs to collect a lot of firewood to keep him warm in the upcoming winter months. And he determined he's going to need about 30 pieces of firewood per day if he's going to burn 24/7. Wyatt created a sawhorse to make cutting his firewood a lot more efficient. For the relief of thousands, maybe millions of people across North America and the world, we are all extremely pleased that Wyatt finally pulled that pussy sliver out of his arm. And I'm confident with that sliver gone, that wound will finally be able to heal. The next scene shows Wyatt finding a massive clump of mushrooms. Now, he's not quite familiar with these mushrooms, but he talked about his mom teaching him a trick to see if they are toxic or not. So he broke off a little piece of mushroom, he put it in his mouth. I'm not sure how long he's going to leave it in there, but leaving in his mouth to see if there's any ill effects. Perhaps his lips go numb or some sort of tingling feeling on his tongue. But apparently his mom taught him a method for testing the toxicity of mushrooms through that. Now, there were messages on the screen that this is not necessarily a reliable way to do that and that you should not practice that technique at home. So Wyatt goes for a walk with his bow, see what he can find, and he ends up making 2 incredible shots on spruce grouse, harvesting them both quickly and efficiently. And he had 2 nice sized grouse to last him for the next 2 to 3 days. As Wyatt was cooking those 2 grouse over the fire, he spoke about his dad and his grandfather and how thankful he was to them for inspiring him and teaching him about the outdoors. And Wyatt spoke about a message his grandfather kind of taught him, to go and go until you can't go anymore. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. My name is Al Tenta. This is Tenta Outdoors. Don't forget to tune in next Thursday night for episode 10 of Alone. Till then, we'll see you next time.